My friend Mimi Bornstein wrote this song that we just sang when her heart was broken. She was in a place of real despair. Finding herself alone at the piano, she wrote a song that invited both spirit and those around her to join in her struggle and to feel her pain. More, the song calls forth the need for comfort and hope in the face of all that gets in the way. Humans are interesting creatures. We are, most of us, born with the capacity to be both creative and stubborn, loving and spiteful, committed and fickle. Though we come into this world with DNA that shapes who we will become, we still can't predict how our life will unfold. We can presume, however, that most of us will face loss and challenge and struggle as we move through our lives. We will have to wade in the water when God makes those waters come up about our feet. Rarely do we reach adulthood without some difficulty getting in our way. And I don't know a soul who reaches midlife, as many of us in this room have, without having to make hard choices, without having to face real struggle, without knowing loss and grief. I think it may be one of the reasons why my friend, the late Unitarian Universalist theologian and minister Forrest Church, called humans homo religiosus, the religious human. We seem to be hardwired to find meaning in life's struggles, perhaps because we can't ever escape them. Well, to find the spiritual strength to persevere in the face of such struggles is challenging. But I believe that perseverance itself is a spiritual strength, and it's my topic this morning. As I've reflected on what it has to teach us, I thought of a word that one of my high school teachers used to encourage her students to get the work done. Maybe you had a similar high school teacher who said you have to have stick-to-itiveness. Remember that? Stick-to-itiveness. And I was really good at that. I'm good at sticking to something. I seem to have been born with a natural tendency to make good on my commitments, perhaps stemming from my inborn inclination to follow rules. How un-Unitarian Universalist of me in some ways. But stick-to-itiveness, as important a quality as it is not quite the same as perseverance. For perseverance means, at least according to one dictionary, a steady persistence in a course of action, especially in spite of difficulties, obstacles, or discouragement. And its root is, I think, so interestingly related to the word severe, perseverance, and it suggests the art of moving through a severe or a challenging time. Well, we live in challenging times. There's so many issues that face us, from global climate change to corporate greed to political, unethical, I can't even say it out loud. You know, those politicians, you have them in Canada, don't you? You certainly have them in the United States. And, you know, of course, the ongoing challenge of just rooting out the invasive species that seem to get into our forests and our gardens. Challenges are everywhere, personal, political, spiritual. So how do we find the spiritual strength to persevere in spite of all that stands in our way? Well, I thought about this a lot because so many of us need to find ways to make it through the hard times that afflict us. Because hard times are here. They're here for most of us. Whether it's powerfully personal, like the folks who are struggling to get a job or dealing with aging parents, finding a way out of a difficult relationship or discovering the strength to face ill health, or more global issues such as figuring out what to do about money and politics or immigration issues or climate change. Hard times are here, and we have to persevere in the face of them. But how in the world do we do that? Well, one source I turned to recently is the author and teacher Margaret J. Wheatley. I don't know if you all know her work. She is a really beautiful writer, and she's been profiled in Yes Magazine, written a number of books. She co-founded the Burkana Institute. And she, a couple of years ago, published a little book called Perseverance. And in it, she seeks to help people like us, who are facing challenges, but really want to make a difference in the world, to find the spiritual strength to carry on. And she begins the book with an interesting piece given to her by a Hopi elder in 2009. And it emerged from a Hopi gathering in June of 2000. And though Wheatley has written it in poetic form, it appears to carry the primary message of those elders. And Jaco today will be reading words that Margaret Wheatley wrote throughout the service. And he'll begin with these words about the Hopi elders.
To my fellow swimmers, here is a river flowing very fast now. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hold on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know that the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our heads above water.
This is a very different way of looking at perseverance, isn't it? The elders are saying not to hold on to what we already have, but to let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river and keep our heads above water. I think people often misinterpret perseverance to mean hanging on to what is in spite of those who say to let go and do something different. Now, of course, there are times when this is the best way to persevere. I mean, any of us who've been married a long time, and I have been married a long time, we know that there are moments when we simply have to hang on to our partner because we made a commitment to do so. That means that even in the midst of the inevitable struggles and challenges of long-term relationships, we hang on in order to work things through and come out on the other side with a deeper and stronger commitment. But sometimes the act of persevering invites us to make changes and to let go of old patterns. In her book, Meg Wheatley has this to say about it.
When things aren't going well, when the results we need aren't materializing, it's time to be different. It's time to choose a new response. We don't have to choose a better response. It just needs to be different. We don't do things differently to upset people. Changing our behavior is how we discover that we have a choice.
And she writes this about choice.
Perseverance is a choice. It's not a simple one-time choice. It's a daily one. There's never a final decision.
There's never a final decision. That may be the essence of spiritually pursuing the strength of perseverance. Rather than the stick-to-itiveness that I learned in high school, it's more of a willingness to keep trying, to keep swimming, as it were, even though we may change directions along the way. Well, how does this translate into real life? Let's return briefly to the story of Joseph Shabalala that I told the children today. Ending apartheid is a wonderful example of this kind of perseverance. Now, you may recall, if you're old enough, that apartheid was the law in South Africa for a very long time, and there actually was very little resistance to it, except in small pockets here and there. But something shifted, something changed, both within and outside the country, as people began to imagine new ways of resisting, including the divestment that took hold in universities across the globe. In South Africa, blacks there used music, among other things, to protest in quiet but real ways. But South African white leaders still resisted, believing that the divestment program or the black resistance would not last. But here's where the story gets interesting. American songwriter Paul Simon, in defiance of what was in reality a boycott of South Africa, chose instead to go into that country, against the advice of many white liberals in the United States, by the way, to make music with the black musicians who were both the victims and the survivors of apartheid. For Joseph Shabalala to work with Paul Simon was powerfully risky. And it's true that many of his family were killed in the apartheid struggle, and he was almost unable to return to his country. "Be still, my heart, even here I am at home," he wrote, thinking he might never go home. But because Joseph and Paul Simon were willing to try a different way of persevering, working with others who also broke the rules, the change they were working for actually happened. Their perseverance paid off. Though things are not perfect by any means in South Africa, apartheid ended, in large part, due to the efforts of those who didn't simply stay the course, but rather kept their heads above water, swimming toward their goal, finding a new direction when it was needed, and staying the course when it was not. Perseverance is a choice, and there is freedom in making it. But it also requires of us patience and a willingness, perhaps even a necessity, to take breaks from the hard work required of us to make a difference in our world. And Meg Wheatley has a good way of approaching this. She writes,
"Having to make a choice to persevere every day keeps us alert and present. Do I have the resources, internal and external, to keep going? Can I deal with what's in front of me right now? Do I have any patience left? Is there any way through this mess?" These critical questions require a momentary pause, a little reflection. Rather than striking out or being reactive to a bad day, we offer ourselves freedom. Do I continue or give up? Even a brief pause creates the space for freedom.
and one way to give ourselves such a pause is to use meditation and prayer and music. So let's reflect on our own commitment to ourselves and each other by singing together a wonderful Buddhist meditation. It's a Buddhist meditation that was set to music by our colleague Mark Hayes. It's hymn number 1031, May I Be Filled with Loving Kindness. Now you know that we sing it 3 times, and the first time we say I, may I be filled, the second is may you be filled, and the third we. So please hold those in your heart as we sing this song, and those of you who feel confident can sing the harmony. Let's rise in body or spirit and sing it together. Well, I would make a lousy Buddhist. I'm too inclined to have a monkey mind, and I can never get comfortable sitting still. And perhaps because I'm such a lousy Buddhist, I find it important to occasionally take part in a Buddhist practice like this song we just sang. It's so beautiful. It's so meaningful. It reminds us to offer ourselves and those around us a blessing of stillness and loving kindness. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be peaceful and at ease. It's so hard to learn those things, but so important. It's particularly important for Unitarian Universalists. I think one of our greatest challenges as a religion is our tendency to rush around, moving from one idea to another, from one belief to another, even from one church to another. There's an old and, to my view, really terrible joke about Unitarian Universalists that suggests that our church is simply a way station on the path from the Methodist to the golf course. Jim Stevenson actually told me this joke yesterday. I said, hey, it's in my sermon. I hate it. I hate those jokes. But there's a seed of truth in it. For as a faith community, we are, for the most part, a collection of people who have come from somewhere else religiously to what we are today. And that's not all bad. As I mentioned earlier, having the sense to change course in midstream is one element of an important kind of perseverance, but it has its shadow side. In that little book I've grown to love, Meg Wheatley has a short essay that struck me more than anything else she wrote. Hear what she has to teach us.
It's hard to find fault with eagerness. It seems like such a good thing. People motivated and eager to get to work, take on a project, change their lives. But not too far down the road, eagerness shows its ugly side. People become so committed to their cause or their work that they become missionaries. They want everyone to work on this particular issue, or do this diet, or follow this plan that will change your life. People also can let their commitment to being of service grow into exaggerated heroism. They're willing to take on any project, any problem you give them. They keep looking for the next great cause. They seem unstoppable in their motivation and energy. Bring it on is their life slogan. Such people are like supernovas. Great clouds of fiery, burning gases that appear powerful and beautiful, but are actually already dead. They have exhausted their energy, blown themselves up, and what we're observing in the night sky is just their last gaseous remains.
Ouch. I think I love this little essay because it rings so true. I know so many people, particularly within our faith community, who are like this. I've watched in every church I've served, and I've been a minister for nearly 30 years. I've watched as people get excited by the potential within a UU congregation to make a difference on an issue they care about, and then they get disillusioned when everyone can't meet them at the supernova level. And far too often these people leave the church angry that they can't convert everyone to their cause. And sadly, they often will leave off their support for their beloved issue because they get burned out, tired and frustrated when their eagerness for the idea or issue doesn't catch everyone on fire, when they don't make the huge difference they were so sure they could. Hear how Meg Wheatley responds to this issue.
Eagerness is a good place to start, but its propensity for unfettered growth requires vigilance. Like a parasite, eagerness tends to kill off its host. It's not a bad thing when our eagerness fades and we find ourselves just doing the work, bored at times, motivated at others, working day to day on little tasks, hoping that some of what we're doing is useful, but not really sure. It's good not to be a supernova.
Well, I always thought supernovas were the people to emulate. My father was a supernova, and he did some amazing work for social justice in his day. So did many other Unitarian Universalists that I admire, but sadly my father died young, worn out from trying to save the world all on his own. Other people I know like this become disillusioned and lose the will to persevere. They give up, they get burned out, not because the work is unimportant, but because they can't figure out how to keep their heads above water when the going gets rough. But you know what? There is power in what Wheatley has to say to us about perseverance. I love how she acknowledges that sometimes the work is boring. I've been a minister for nearly 30 years. Sometimes the work is boring. We can't always know if what we're doing is useful or right. That part of having spiritual strength means staying with something even when we're not always sure if things will work out. There's so much that needs our commitment and our energy. There are so many really big challenges facing us today. It will take a lot of work to make a difference. It will take a lot of people. As one song that I learned to sing at Elliott reminds us, we have to turn the world around. But it will also take patience and a willingness to persevere even when giving up might seem like the better choice. Margaret Wheatley challenges people like us to stay in the river, to swim at times and to tread water at others. She knows that perseverance requires us to do the best we can and to help others as well. Listen to her wise words once again.
It can take many years to discover clarity, how to withstand life's challenges, how to stay in the river. Instead of struggling or avoiding difficulties, we become people who know that they can hold their ground, even as the currents intensify and threaten to drag us under. We learn to sink our feet into the mud ever more deeply because we know that more challenges are coming. Once we've experienced life in all its dimensions, good, bad, hard, easy, life doesn't seem so challenging. Every situation is what it is. Sometimes lovely, sometimes difficult. Every situation is workable. We're fully in the river, and we're learning how to keep our heads above water.
The spiritual strength of perseverance places in us the ability to live fully through all that life brings us. It's not hanging on for dear life, sticking to familiar ways and avoiding change. Rather, to persevere is to trust that we have the capacity to do the work of building a better world without burning ourselves out. Each of us will find the small and large ways that we can impact the world around us. Perhaps it's your parenting of kids. I love seeing all your kids who grow up to be loving of themselves and others. Perhaps it's the way that you live lightly on the planet. Perhaps it's in the art or the music you create or the buildings you design or the software you develop. And each of us can discover the spiritual strengths to live in this challenging world without burning out like that supernova. I hope that the spiritual practice of coming here to this church week after week sustains you in your work and your life. There are times when I wonder if what we do here matters, if this thing we call a church makes a difference in anyone's life. Like Meg Wheatley wrote, I, like many of you, occasionally find myself just doing work. Bored at times, motivated at others, working day to day on little tasks, hoping that some of what I'm doing is useful, but not really sure. But I keep on doing it because I believe that the religious community that we as Unitarians create together give me and you strength to persevere. Being with each other week after week reminds us that we're all swimming in the same direction, trying to build a world where unity and love, the primary purpose and meaning of our faith, where unity and love prevail. I'm not sure, really, how to get there. I'm not even sure I know exactly where we're going. But together, with Unitarian Universalists at my side, I find the spiritual strength to make the journey. And I hope that you do too. For indeed, we are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we'll get there. Heaven knows when we'll get there, but we know we will. That's the song we're going to sing, Woy Ya Ya. And I understand you all know it, which I'm thrilled, because it's such a great song. We're going, heaven knows where. We're going.